Aristotle reminds us that every human being is always in pursuit of something. From the moment we wake up to the moment we rest, our lives are filled with choices, goals, and desires. We seek food to satisfy hunger, work to earn wealth, friendships to ease loneliness, recognition to affirm our worth, and knowledge to sharpen our minds. All of these pursuits point towards something we value, but if we look closely, Aristotle teaches us that there must be something higher than all these ends, something that stands above the temporary aims and becomes the very purpose of life itself. That ultimate purpose, he says, is happiness, not the fleeting happiness of pleasure, nor the shallow happiness of possessions, but the deeper, lasting state he calls eudaimonia, a life of flourishing, wholeness, and fulfillment. The mistake many of us make is confusing happiness with satisfaction of desire. When we get a promotion, we say we are happy. When we purchase something new, we say we are happy. When we enjoy a meal, a vacation, or an accomplishment, we claim happiness. Yet, as soon as the novelty fades, we return to longing, restless again for the next pursuit. These are moments of pleasure, but not the essence of happiness. Aristotle saw this clearly more than 2,000 years ago. He argued that if happiness were merely about pleasure or wealth, it would be fragile and dependent on circumstances beyond our control. True happiness, however, must be something self-sufficient, something complete, something that, once attained, leaves us needing nothing more. That is why he identifies happiness not as a feeling, but as the highest good, the end for which all our actions are ultimately directed. Think for a moment about why people chase money. They say it will bring comfort, security, and opportunity. But money itself is never desired for its own sake. It is always a means to something else. The same is true for fame. People do not long for recognition simply to see their names praised, but because they believe recognition will bring them validation or influence. Pleasure, too, is temporary. It satisfies in the moment but cannot sustain the soul. Aristotle pushes us to ask the deeper question: if all these things are means, what then is the end? What is the one thing sought not for the sake of something else, but for its own intrinsic value? The answer is happiness. We seek happiness always, and not because it leads to anything else, but because it is the ultimate good. Every ambition, every dream, every effort, whether we realize it or not, points toward this single goal. But here is where Aristotle offers his profound wisdom. Happiness is not about what we possess, but about what we become. It is not about external conditions, but about the state of our soul. A person may be wealthy and still miserable. A person may be surrounded by pleasures and still restless. A person may gain recognition and still feel empty inside. These examples reveal that happiness cannot be anchored in what is outside of us. It must arise from within, from living in accordance with our nature and our highest potential. And for Aristotle, that means living a life guided by reason and shaped by virtue. In other words, happiness is not an accident of fortune, but the natural result of a life well lived. When Aristotle calls happiness the highest human goal, he means it is the most complete and enduring state that fulfills us in ways no other pursuit can. Imagine building a house. Wealth, pleasure, and success may be like bricks and beams, but happiness is the completed home, the purpose for which all the materials exist. Without the house itself, the parts have no meaning. Likewise, without happiness as the end, all our efforts lose direction. We work, we strive, we dream, but without the compass of true happiness, our actions scatter like leaves in the wind. With it, however, everything aligns. Happiness becomes the measure of a meaningful life, and all other goals, money, recognition, comfort, take their rightful place as tools, not ends. What makes Aristotle's insight timeless is that it calls us to examine the quality of our living, not merely the quantity of what we achieve. He asks us to see happiness not as something handed to us by chance, but as something we cultivate through our choices. The goal of life is not to accumulate more, but to align more deeply with what brings lasting fulfillment. That is why Aristotle insists happiness must be self-sufficient. It must rest on something stable, something we carry within ourselves that cannot be stripped away by loss, hardship, or fortune's changing winds. It is not the fragile glow of temporary satisfaction, but the steady flame of a life directed toward what is truly good. Many people spend their lives chasing success only to find themselves empty once they attain it. Others live for comfort, but feel restless despite having all their needs met. These stories echo Aristotle's warning: happiness is not found in external goods. Instead, it is the byproduct of living a life of virtue. If we live with courage, we find strength in adversity. If we live with justice, we find harmony in relationships. If we live with temperance, we find freedom from excess. If we live with wisdom, we find clarity in choices. In all of this, happiness arises naturally, like fruit from a well-tended tree. It is not forced, it is grown. When we recognize happiness as the highest goal, our perspective shifts. We begin to see our ambitions differently. Wealth is no longer an end in itself, but a tool to live generously and responsibly. Recognition is no longer about feeding pride, but about using influence to uplift others. Pleasure is no longer about indulgence, but about balance and appreciation. Everything falls into order when happiness, rightly understood, becomes the guiding star. It transforms our daily actions into meaningful steps on a larger journey. It frees us from the trap of endless desire, because we no longer seek fulfillment in what cannot satisfy. Instead, we root our lives in the one pursuit that gives everything else meaning. This is the wisdom Aristotle offers us. Happiness is not something that arrives when we stumble upon fortune or achieve all our goals. It is the deliberate, conscious aim of life itself. Every choice we make points us either closer to it or further from it. And once we see happiness as the highest good, we can no longer be deceived by the false promises of temporary pleasures. We come to understand that happiness is not only possible but attainable, not by accident, not by luck, but by the intentional shaping of our character and the pursuit of virtue. In this way, we step into the path that leads us from restless desire toward lasting fulfillment, setting the foundation for the deeper wisdom that true happiness comes not from what we have, but from the virtues we live by, aligning us with the greater truth of our existence. Aristotle teaches us that happiness is not simply stumbled upon, nor is it gifted by chance. It is cultivated, like a garden, through the soil of character and the discipline of virtue. To him, virtue is not an abstract idea, but the very heartbeat of a flourishing life. He believed that the highest good we can achieve comes not from fleeting pleasures, nor from wealth, nor from honors bestowed upon us, but from living in accordance with virtue. Virtue is the foundation upon which happiness stands, and without it, no amount of external success can bring lasting fulfillment. But what does it mean to live virtuously? For Aristotle, virtue is not about perfection or rigid rules. It is about balance. It is about finding the right measure in all things, the middle ground between excess and deficiency. He called this the golden mean, and it serves as a compass for human conduct. Courage, for example, lies between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity lies between stinginess and extravagance. Temperance lies between indulgence and insensibility. By learning to walk this middle path, we shape a character that is stable, harmonious, and aligned with reason. And when our character aligns with reason, we live in tune with our deepest nature, and happiness follows naturally. Consider how often misery is born from imbalance. When someone is too fearful, opportunities slip away, and life shrinks into a narrow shell. When someone is too reckless, they fall into danger, leaving behind chaos and regret. Both extremes bring suffering, but courage, the balance between them, brings strength, growth, and dignity. In the same way, a person who clings greedily to wealth is consumed by anxiety, while one who spends thoughtlessly is burdened by ruin. Neither finds peace. Yet generosity, the balance between greed and waste, allows wealth to serve its proper role, bringing joy to both giver and receiver. Aristotle recognized that every virtue works this way. It frees us from the slavery of extremes and anchors us in the harmony that gives rise to happiness. Virtue, then, is not a single act but a habit. It is not about choosing rightly once, but about consistently choosing rightly until the choice becomes second nature. Aristotle reminds us that we are what we repeatedly do, and excellence is not an isolated act, but a habit of life. Just as a musician becomes skilled through daily practice, just as an athlete becomes strong through constant training, so too does a human being become virtuous by repeatedly practicing good choices. And when virtue becomes habitual, it transforms not only what we do but who we are. This is why virtue is the true path to happiness, because happiness is not a possession to be hoarded, but a way of being. A person who cultivates justice will naturally create harmony in relationships and communities, and from that harmony flows a joy deeper than selfish gain could ever offer. A person who cultivates wisdom will naturally make choices that align with truth and reason, and from that alignment flows a peace that ignorance can never provide. A person who cultivates temperance will not be enslaved by cravings, and in that freedom lies the contentment that indulgence never brings. A person who cultivates courage will face hardship with dignity, and in that dignity lies a strength more enduring than comfort. Virtue transforms the soul, and a transformed soul experiences happiness not as a fragile feeling but as a steady way of life. We see, too, that virtue gives us power over circumstances. Fortune may change, wealth may vanish, health may falter, recognition may fade, but virtue remains within our control. No one can strip away our integrity, our courage, our wisdom, our justice, unless we ourselves abandon them. In this sense, virtue makes happiness resilient. It is not dependent on fortune's favor, but anchored in the choices we carry within. A person of virtue can endure suffering without losing meaning, can face loss without losing hope, can meet injustice without becoming unjust. This stability is the secret of true happiness, because it is rooted in the one thing no external power can take away: the character we have cultivated. Think of two individuals facing the same storm. One, without virtue, is tossed about by fear, anger, or despair. The other, grounded in virtue, meets the storm with courage, patience, and resolve. The storm is the same, but the experience is not. One is broken by it, while the other grows stronger through it. This difference lies not in fortune but in virtue. And it is this truth that reveals why Aristotle insisted that happiness comes through virtue, because life is uncertain, but character can be steady, circumstances are fragile, but virtue endures. Virtue also connects us to something greater than ourselves. When we live virtuously, we not only enrich our own lives but also uplift the lives of others. Justice ensures fairness and harmony in society. Generosity builds bonds of trust and compassion. Wisdom guides communities toward truth and progress. Courage inspires others to stand firm in difficult times. In this way, virtue creates ripples that extend far beyond the individual, shaping families, communities, and even nations. And from this interconnected flourishing arises a deeper happiness, one that transcends the self. Happiness is never fully private. It is bound to the well-being of others, and virtue ensures that our lives contribute to this shared good. Aristotle understood that without virtue, even the most fortunate life collapses into emptiness. Imagine someone who has wealth but no generosity, influence but no justice, pleasures but no temperance, opportunities but no wisdom. Such a person may appear successful, but beneath the surface lies unrest, dissatisfaction, and moral decay. By contrast, someone who has cultivated virtue can find fulfillment even in modest circumstances. A virtuous life shines not because of what it possesses, but because of the inner richness it carries. That richness is the soil from which true happiness grows. Virtue is not about denying ourselves joy, but about finding joy in its proper measure and in its proper place. It is not about rejecting ambition, but about guiding ambition toward what is noble. It is not about suppressing emotion, but about aligning emotion with reason so that passion serves purpose. In all of this, virtue does not limit life, it expands it. It allows us to experience pleasure without enslavement, success without arrogance, failure without despair. Virtue transforms life from a restless chase into a meaningful journey, and along that journey happiness arises as its natural companion. When we understand this, we see why Aristotle ties happiness so closely to virtue. Happiness is not about fleeting moments of satisfaction, but about living in accordance with our highest nature. Our highest nature is not to be creatures of appetite, chasing desire endlessly, but to be creatures of reason, capable of choosing balance, justice, and wisdom. And when we live according to this nature, we flourish. Virtue, therefore, is the bridge between our potential and our fulfillment. It is the path that leads us to the happiness every human heart longs for. And so, Aristotle's wisdom becomes clear. Happiness is not given, it is grown, not seized, but cultivated, not found in the excesses of fortune, but in the steady practice of virtue. Each act of balance, each moment of courage, each choice for justice, each step in wisdom strengthens the soul and leads it closer to the highest good. Through virtue, happiness ceases to be a fragile dream and becomes a way of living, a way that carries us forward toward the truth that happiness is born not from possession, but from the virtues that guide the soul to flourish. Aristotle reminds us that happiness is not something we passively hold in our hands, like a coin or a trophy. It is something far more alive and dynamic. It is the result of action, of choices, of living. He saw clearly that the essence of human life is not defined by what we possess, but by what we do with the time and opportunities given to us. Possessions can be lost, honors can fade, pleasures can vanish, but the actions we perform shape our character, and our character becomes the very substance of who we are. Happiness, therefore, cannot be reduced to the things we own or the circumstances we inherit. It must be found in the way we live, the virtues we practice, and the purpose we embody. Think of the many people who appear successful by outward measures, those with wealth, power, or status, yet feel restless, anxious, or unfulfilled. Their lives, though abundant in possessions, lack the deep fulfillment that only virtuous action can bring. Contrast them with those who may have little in material terms, but live with integrity, kindness, and courage. Their joy is not rooted in fortune, but in the steady satisfaction that comes from knowing they are living rightly. This contrast illustrates Aristotle's wisdom. Happiness is not the passive possession of goods, but the active exercise of virtue. It is not given by circumstance but built through action. Every choice we make is a brushstroke on the canvas of our character. When we choose courage in the face of fear, we paint strength. When we choose generosity over greed, we paint compassion. When we choose honesty instead of deceit, we paint integrity. Over time, these brushstrokes create a portrait, and that portrait reflects the soul of the person we become. Happiness is the radiance of that portrait when it is painted with virtue. It is not the sudden stroke of luck that defines us, but the daily strokes of action that shape us. Aristotle understood that human beings are creatures of activity. Unlike plants, which flourish simply by existing, or animals, which flourish by instinct, humans flourish through deliberate action guided by reason. To live well is to act well, and to act well is to live in accordance with virtue. If we sit idly waiting for happiness to arrive, we will wait forever. But if we engage our lives with purpose, practicing the virtues of courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom, happiness emerges naturally. It is not a static state but an unfolding experience born from the rhythm of virtuous living. Consider the virtue of courage. Happiness does not come from avoiding all challenges or hiding from difficulties. It comes from facing adversity with dignity and strength. A soldier who fights bravely for justice, a parent who sacrifices for a child, a student who perseveres despite setbacks. All of them act with courage, and in that action, they taste a happiness that fear could never provide. The happiness they find is not the fleeting pleasure of safety or comfort, but the enduring satisfaction of living in alignment with what is noble. Or think of justice. Happiness does not come from taking advantage of others to gain more for ourselves. Such gains may bring temporary satisfaction but leave behind guilt, division, and unrest. Justice, however, creates harmony. It allows relationships, families, and communities to thrive. When a leader governs justly, when a friend keeps their word, when a stranger acts fairly, they create bonds of trust. From that trust arises a happiness far deeper than selfish gain could ever achieve. Once again, happiness reveals itself as the fruit of action, not possession. Even temperance, often misunderstood as restraint or denial, is an active force. Happiness is not found in overindulgence, for excess breeds regret and emptiness. Nor is it found in total denial, for asceticism can become its own form of imbalance. Instead, temperance allows us to enjoy life's pleasures in their proper measure, keeping desire in harmony with reason. The happiness that flows from temperance is not the hollow thrill of indulgence, but the calm contentment of balance. This is not the happiness of possession, it is the happiness of wise action. Wisdom itself is perhaps the clearest example. Happiness does not arise from accumulating knowledge like coins in a chest. It comes from applying knowledge, from acting in accordance with truth, from making decisions that align with reason. A wise person does not simply know what is good, they live it. Their choices bring clarity, their actions bring harmony, and from this harmony emerges happiness. Wisdom, when practiced, transforms knowledge into the art of living well. Aristotle's insight dismantles the illusion that happiness is waiting at the end of some external achievement. It is not a prize handed out when we reach a milestone. It is not guaranteed by wealth, beauty, or recognition. It arises in the very process of living virtuously, in the daily acts of kindness, courage, honesty, and balance. Each action we take builds upon the last, creating a life that is not only meaningful but deeply fulfilling. Happiness, therefore, is not a possession to hoard, but a way of walking through the world. When we embrace this truth, our priorities shift. We stop measuring our worth by how much we own and begin measuring it by how we live. We stop chasing after fleeting pleasures and begin cultivating virtues that endure. We stop waiting for happiness to arrive and begin realizing that it is already present in the noble actions we take each day. Even in hardship, even in loss, even in struggle. Happiness is not beyond our reach because virtue is always within our power. This is the freedom Aristotle offers us. The freedom to ground happiness not in external fortune, but in the inner strength of our choices. Imagine a person who dedicates their life to helping others, even if they themselves live simply. Their happiness is not dependent on wealth, but on the joy of serving. Imagine a person who, despite facing setbacks, persists in their studies or their craft. Their happiness is not diminished by failure, because it arises from the courage to continue. Imagine a person who chooses honesty when deceit would be easier. Their happiness is not threatened by exposure or shame, because their integrity protects them. These examples show us that happiness is not about what we possess, but about what we practice. Life, with all its unpredictability, can strip us of possessions, honors, and pleasures, but it cannot take away our ability to act with virtue. And as long as we can act with virtue, we can live with happiness. This is the enduring gift of Aristotle's wisdom. Happiness is safeguarded not by fortune but by character, not by luck but by choice. It is a flame that cannot be extinguished by the winds of circumstance, because it burns from within, fueled by the steady practice of virtue. When we see happiness in this way, we no longer feel at the mercy of fortune's ups and downs. We discover that every moment, every choice, is an opportunity to act well, to live rightly, to cultivate the virtues that lead us toward flourishing. Each step becomes meaningful, each action purposeful, and happiness arises not at the end of the journey, but along the path itself. This is why Aristotle insists that happiness is found not in possession but in action. For it is through action that we shape who we are, through action that we align with virtue, and through action that we discover the lasting happiness every human soul seeks. Aristotle saw that true happiness is not something captured in a single moment, nor is it achieved through one great act or fleeting success. It is the result of an entire life lived well, the fruit of a lifelong practice of virtue. To him, happiness is not like a prize won at the end of a race, but like health, cultivated over years through discipline, balance, and care. Just as no single healthy meal makes a person well, no single virtuous act makes a person happy. Happiness is a state of flourishing that emerges from consistent choices, the steady rhythm of aligning our lives with reason and virtue. It is not a destination but a lifelong journey. We live in a world eager for shortcuts, where many believe happiness can be purchased, inherited, or stumbled upon in luck. But Aristotle challenges us to see that real happiness demands something greater, the daily work of shaping our character. He understood that virtue is not natural at birth. We are born with the potential for it, but it must be trained, nurtured, and practiced. Just as an athlete cannot win a crown without training, and a musician cannot play beautifully without practice, no human being can flourish without the patient cultivation of virtue. Happiness is not given freely. It is earned through a life devoted to what is noble and good. Virtue, in Aristotle's view, is about forming habits that endure. It is not enough to act with courage once. We must practice courage until it becomes a steady part of who we are. It is not enough to act justly in one situation. We must shape our lives so that justice flows naturally from us. Temperance must be woven into our desires, wisdom into our decisions, generosity into our dealings. Over time, these repeated acts become character, and character becomes destiny. This is the lifelong work that makes happiness possible, the deliberate, continuous practice of virtue until it defines our very being. Think of how easily one can be swayed without virtue. A person without the habit of self-control may enjoy pleasure in the moment, but will soon be ruled by cravings that leave them empty. A person without the habit of courage may avoid discomfort for a time, but will live in the shadow of fear, missing opportunities to grow. A person without the habit of justice may gain advantage through selfishness, but will live in conflict and mistrust. Each lack of virtue leads not to happiness but to restlessness, guilt and disharmony. But when virtue is practiced consistently, life takes on stability. We are no longer tossed about by every desire or fear, because we have built within ourselves a compass that points us toward what is good. What makes this practice even more powerful is its enduring nature. External goods, wealth, status, even health, can be taken away. But virtue, once cultivated, cannot be stolen. A person of remains courageous even when circumstances change. A person of wisdom carries clarity even into the unknown. A person of justice remains upright even in a corrupt world. Virtue endures beyond fortune, and because happiness is rooted in virtue, it too endures. This is why Aristotle taught that happiness must be measured over the span of a lifetime, not in fleeting moments. One swallow does not make a summer, he said, and neither does one good day make a life happy. It is the consistency, the continuity, the unwavering practice of virtue that produces a life of true flourishing. Consider the example of a person who spends years cultivating generosity. At first, giving may feel like a duty, perhaps even a sacrifice. But over time, the habit shapes the heart, and generosity becomes a natural expression of who they are. Their life, enriched by bonds of gratitude and trust, radiates fulfillment. Contrast this with one who hoards wealth selfishly. They may feel temporary satisfaction, but their life narrows into isolation, filled with anxiety over loss. The difference lies not in the amount of wealth, but in the character formed by habit. Happiness grows not from what we have, but from the virtues we have practiced throughout life. The lifelong practice of virtue also provides resilience. Life will inevitably bring trials, loss, failure, illness, injustice. Without virtue, such trials crush us. But with virtue, we find strength even in suffering. Courage allows us to face hardship without despair. Wisdom allows us to see meaning in struggle. Justice allows us to remain fair even when wronged. Temperance allows us to endure pain without being consumed by it. In this way, virtue equips us not only for life's joys, but also for its inevitable sorrows. Happiness, then, is not the absence of suffering, but the presence of a soul so well trained in virtue that it remains steady regardless of fortune's blows. This is why Aristotle insisted that happiness is not a momentary feeling, but the culmination of a life. To know whether a life is happy, we must look not only at how it began or how it feels in the present, but how it has been lived as a whole. Was it guided by virtue? Was it devoted to what is noble and good? Did it flourish not in possessions, but in character? Only when virtue has been consistently practiced across the span of years can we say that a life has truly been happy. Such a perspective transforms how we view our days. Instead of chasing happiness as if it were a prize just beyond reach, we see each day as an opportunity to practice the habits that make happiness inevitable. Every act of kindness strengthens our soul. Every moment of honesty builds integrity. Every choice for balance steadies our life. Over weeks, months, years, these choices accumulate into a life that radiates fulfillment. Happiness is not a sudden arrival. It is the natural result of the steady practice of virtue across a lifetime. In the end, Aristotle's wisdom teaches us that happiness cannot be demanded or bought, nor can it be rushed. It unfolds like the growth of a tree, slow, steady, strengthened by roots of virtue, bearing fruit in season. Each act of courage, each deed of justice, each choice of wisdom nourishes that tree until, over the course of a life, it stands tall and unshakable. And when life is viewed in its entirety, happiness is revealed not as fortune's gift, but as virtue's reward. It is the lasting fulfillment born of a soul that has lived in harmony with reason and goodness, proving that true happiness comes not from fleeting gains, but from the lifelong practice of virtue, where all our striving and all our living find their highest purpose.